My name is Lee Min-jae. I am 27 years old, a reporter who has learned that most ghost stories collapse under daylight. But daylight is gone now, and I am writing these words in a place that feels like it has been waiting for me long before I arrived. The bus dropped me at a lonely stretch of mountain road and pulled away before I could ask if it would return tomorrow. Behind me, the forest leaned close. Ahead, a narrow lane curved between stone walls until rows of ongi jars appeared, dark clay bellies sealed with stones, lined up like silent guards. The air reeked of soy ferment, pine resin, and something metallic, like old blood. A stray dog barked once from the roof of a shed, then snapped its mouth shut as if reminded it should not make a sound. The first house stood with its gate open as though it had been expecting me. A woman stepped out before I could knock. Oh, her back was straight, her hair knotted into a bun, her face thin and wind-carved. She did not ask my name. She only said, "Reporter," and turned her back, expecting me to follow. Her name, when she finally gave it, was Yoon. The main room smelled of wood smoke and boiled rice. On the floor, beside the bedding prepared for me, lay a roll of white paper, a bowl of sticky paste, and a wooden brush. I asked if there was some festival. Her eyes met mine flat, unwavering. Not a festival, a rule. When the drum begins, paste the paper across the window, and if you hear your name, her voice thinned into a whisper, do not answer. I laughed. Too quickly. She didn't. Dinner was tofu stew and hot rice. I tried to eat casually, but every few minutes I felt eyes on me. Outside the open door, neighbors had gathered, men, women, even a child clutching a rag doll. They stood in silence, watching as though I were a show. They hadn't paid to see. Their expressions were blank, except for one thing. None of them blinked while I looked back. When the village dog barked toward the ridge, every head turned at once. No one spoke. They just stared into the darkness between the pines, as if waiting for something to climb out. That was when I realized this was not hospitality. This was preparation. The village was already closing itself, and I had walked straight inside. I told myself it was just fatigue. The way strangers' stares can feel heavier in a place where you don't belong. But as the night folded in, the village changed its face. The lane outside Yoon's gate grew quiet. Too quiet. Not the kind of quiet you get in the countryside, with crickets and rustling leaves, but a sealed silence, as if even the insects knew to keep still. Yoon set down a lantern near the low table. Its flame fluttered and bent toward the door, as though drawn to something waiting outside. She laid a folded blanket beside me, but kept her shoes on, as if she had no intention of sleeping tonight. "You'll hear it soon," she said. "The drum?" I asked. Her gaze didn't waver. It has always been the drum. I wanted to ask more, but a knock rattled the wooden gate. 3 sharp raps, then nothing. Yoon didn't move. Her face tightened, but she didn't so much as breathe differently. I half rose to answer, thinking maybe a neighbor had come. She caught my wrist so hard her nails pressed through my sleeve. "Do not open," she whispered. The knocking didn't return. Instead, from outside came the faint scrape of feet dragging across gravel, circling the house. Once, twice, then fading. I sat back down, pulse hammering in my throat. Yoon finally let go of my wrist. On her palm was a shallow red mark where she had gripped too tight, not from me, but from her own hand clenched into a fist. To distract myself, I looked at the things she had left me: the brush, the paste, the paper. The paper was thicker than I expected, almost cloth-like, with faint gray fibers running through it. I held it up, and in the lantern light, it seemed to tremble, as if already waiting to be pasted against the window. Outside, a dog whined a long, low sound that ended in a sharp yelp, then silence. I froze, listening. The silence returned heavier than before, pressing against the walls, against my ears. That was when I heard it. A whisper. Not from Yoon, not from the yard. From just beyond the paper wall of the room. A man's voice, low, deliberate, close enough that I could feel the air shift. It said my full name, Lee Min-jae. The paper wall bulged inward slightly, as if someone pressed their lips right against it from the other side. I wanted to speak habit, reflex, but Yoon's warning slammed back into my head. Do not answer. My tongue stuck to the roof of my mouth. My chest burned from holding my breath. Then, just as suddenly, the wall went still. The whisper was gone, but the paper carried a faint mark where the bulge had been, a damp outline, shaped like a mouth. I did not sleep. I could not. Even when the whisper faded, the air in the room still carried it, like a vibration left in the bones of a bell. Yoon blew out the lantern and lay down, but her eyes stayed open in the dark. I pretended not to notice. The house creaked once, twice, then fell still. And then the sound came faint at first, drifting through the walls. A single beat of a drum, not a festival drum, not rhythmic, not alive. This was slow, deliberate, the kind of sound meant to guide the dead. Yoon sat up instantly. Her silhouette stiffened like a tree bracing against the wind. It begins, she whispered. I crept toward the window. The strips of paper and the bowl of paste waited there, but I hadn't yet moved to cover the frame. Curiosity gnawed at me, the same instinct that had dragged me to this village in the first place. I pulled aside the curtain, just a finger's width. The lane outside had changed, where houses had been lit with soft lamplight an hour ago. Now, there were only shadows. The neighbors who had watched me eat were gone. In their place stood figures in white mourning robes, motionless, holding long sticks of incense that burned without flame. Their faces, if they had faces, were hidden beneath veils of thin gauze that trembled in the night breeze. One of them turned toward my window. I dropped the curtain and stumbled back, heart crashing in my chest. Yoon hissed, "Fool!" She seized the brush, dipped it in paste, and dragged it across the frame in thick strokes. Her hands shook, but the paper stuck fast. The window disappeared beneath a white shroud. The drumbeat came again, louder, heavier, and this time it was joined by something worse. The faint clang of metal gongs, the keening of wooden flutes. A funeral procession was moving through the village. From somewhere farther down the lane came the sound of chanting, dozens of voices rising and falling in unison, their words blurred but carrying one rhythm, mourning. I pressed my ear to the floorboards without meaning to. Beneath the house, beneath the earth itself, something seemed to be moving in answer to the drum, like roots shifting, like bones turning over. The chanting drew closer. I realized with a chill that the funeral procession was circling the houses, one by one, and soon it would pass hours. Yoon shoved the last strip of paper into place and pulled me away from the wall. Her breath stank of fear. Do not listen. Do not look. If they stop here, you must stay silent. The drumbeat struck again this time. So close, the floor rattled, and from beyond the sealed window, through paper meant to protect me, a voice called once more. This time, it was not just a whisper. It was a chorus of voices, all speaking my name, Lee Min-jae. The chanting grew heavier until the air itself seemed to vibrate. Yoon crouched by the table, lips moving soundlessly, as if repeating a prayer only her mouth remembered. I tried to do the same, but my tongue was dry, stuck to my teeth. Then suddenly, the noise stopped. The drum, the gongs, the voices, all at once, cut clean. The silence that followed was worse. It pressed against the walls, made my ears ring. And then came the shuffling, slow, deliberate, dozens of feet dragging across gravel. Step, pause, step, pause. They were right outside the gate. I wanted to believe they would pass us by, but the steps stopped, right in front of Yoon's house. A knock rattled the papered window. 3 sharp raps, then a pause, then another 3. My breath clawed in my throat. Yoon grabbed my arm, nails biting into my skin. She shook her head violently, mouthing only one word, silent. Through the paper, a shadow leaned close. Its outline was wrong, too long in the neck, too narrow in the shoulders. A whisper slid through the seams. Lee Min-jae, come out. The voice was layered, like 3 people speaking in one breath. I bit my lip until I tasted iron. The paper bulged inward, as if something pressed its entire face against it. For a moment, I swore I could see the faint shapes of teeth through the thin veil of paste and fiber. Then, the chanting started again. Louder, angrier. The procession moved on, their footsteps grinding gravel, their gongs clanging out of rhythm, their voices breaking into wails. But just as they left, a child's voice whispered at the crack under the door, soft, pleading, "Ajushi, open, please." My heart froze. It was the same voice of the boy I had seen earlier, the one practicing kicks in the yard. I almost answered, almost, but Yoon slammed her palm over my mouth before I could. Her eyes were wild, glistening in the dark. She shook her head, and I understood whatever spoke in that boy's voice was not the boy. Outside, the child's voice laughed, a brittle, breaking laugh, and then the footsteps dragged farther down the lane, leaving the house shuddering in silence once more. When the last echoes of the chanting faded, I thought relief would come. It didn't. The silence they left behind felt heavier, like the house itself was holding its breath. Yoon sat slumped against the wall, her hand still trembling from where she had silenced me. Neither of us spoke. The smell of smoke lingered. Though there was no fire burning, I needed to distract myself, anything to keep from listening for the next knock. That was when I noticed something odd about the low table where Yoon had laid my dinner. The edge of the floorboard beneath it was slightly raised. I reached down, pulled. The plank shifted with a groan of wood. "Don't," Yoon hissed, but her voice cracked, and she didn't stop me. Beneath the board lay a box wrapped in faded cloth. I drew it out carefully, dust spilling over my fingers. Yoon turned her face away as if she couldn't bear to see it. Inside were papers burned at the edges, brittle as autumn leaves. Old photographs, too, black and white portraits of villagers standing stiffly in front of the ginkgo tree, their faces blurred, some scratched out by hand, and at the very bottom, a ledger, handwritten in neat columns, dated decades ago. My Korean wasn't perfect with old characters, but I could make out enough. A list of names, dozens, each one with a mark beside it. Some notes said died in fire, others unrecovered. My stomach lurched when I saw the heading. 1974, mass funeral, entire village. I flipped further and froze. There it was. My name, Lee Min-jae, written in ink, so faded it looked centuries old. I stared at it, throat tightening. This couldn't be right. There were plenty of Lee Min-jaes in Korea. It had to be coincidence, a trick of common names. But next to it was something worse, a note scrawled in red ink. Will return. Yoon's hand slammed the ledger shut. Her voice was raw. Now you understand. This place doesn't keep outsiders. It takes names. And once it has your name, it waits. Her eyes met mine for the first time since the procession stopped. You should never have come here. And then distant, muffled, the drum struck again. The drum beat faded into the night, but its echo clung to me, pulsing in my chest long after the sound had gone. I tried to steady my breathing, but every time I closed my eyes, I saw the ledger, the faded ink, my name written there long before I was born. Yoon sat in the corner, staring at nothing. She whispered to herself, but the words were too soft, too broken, like prayers chewed thin by repetition. I turned toward the small cabinet beside the bedding. Its lacquered doors were cracked, the surface dulled by years of smoke. On it stood a mirror, oval-shaped, its silver warped with age. I don't know why I looked. Curiosity, habit something stronger than sense. At first, it only showed me pale, sweating, jaw clenched too tight. But as I leaned closer, the surface rippled faintly, as if a breeze passed across water. And then I saw them, rows of faces behind me, villagers in white mourning robes, standing shoulder to shoulder, their features blurred, like wet ink running across paper, but their eyes dark. Hollow pits stared back through the glass. I spun around. The room was empty. Yoon hadn't moved. I turned back to the mirror. The figures were still there, closer. One of them lifted a hand, reaching for my shoulder. I stumbled back, heart slamming against my ribs. The mirror tilted, almost fell, but didn't shatter. Its surface pulsed once, like something breathing behind it. Don't look into the glass, Yoon hissed suddenly. Her eyes snapped into focus for the first time all night. It's another door. That's how they enter. I covered the mirror with a blanket, my hands shaking so badly I nearly dropped it. But even through the cloth, I could feel them pressing, as though the glass still carried their weight. Then came a new sound. Not the drum, not the chanting, scratching from the papered window. Slow, deliberate, the sound of fingernails dragging across the white strips I had pasted earlier. The scratching spelled out letters. My name, over and over. Lee Min-jae. Yoon clamped both hands over her ears. Tears slipped down her cheeks. They know you now, she whispered. They've taken your reflection. Next comes your voice. The scratching stopped, and in the silence that followed, I heard it again. My own voice, echoing softly from outside the window. Let me in. The scratching at the window finally stopped. but the silence it left behind was worse than the noise. I pressed both hands against my ears, as if that could block the echo of my own voice still clinging to the walls. Yoon rose shakily and lit the lantern again. Her eyes looked years older than before. "They won't stop now," she said. "Once they know your name, they keep calling until you answer. The paper can hold them for a night, but not forever." Her words chilled me deeper than the mountain air. "Then what do we do?" She didn't answer. Instead, she slid open the back door and gestured for me to follow. The yard was darker than pitch, the ginkgo tree at the center, bending like a giant listening. Yun led me to the shed behind the house. Its door was sealed with rope, knots hardened by years of weather. She cut them with a kitchen blade, each strand snapping like bone. "Where does this lead?" I asked. "The ground remembers," she whispered. Inside, the shed was empty, but for a trapdoor set into the dirt floor. She lifted it, revealing a ladder descending into blackness. The smell rose up, first mildew, rust, and something older, sour, like incense burned too long. I hesitated. She went first. The lantern's light shook against the stone walls as we climbed down. My foot landed on damp earth. I realized we were in some kind of tunnel, narrow, low, carved out of rock. The walls were lined with shelves, not books, not tools, urns. Dozens of clay urns, each marked with a strip of faded paper, scrawled in black ink. Some names I recognized from the ledger upstairs. We walked deeper, the tunnel narrowing until my shoulders brushed the walls. That was when I heard it, faint chanting, muffled, as though dozens of throats were singing through dirt. It wasn't coming from ahead. It was coming from the urns themselves. Yoon held the lantern close to one. Inside, something shifted ashes, maybe, or something trying to take shape. The sound grew louder, a chorus of whispers, and among them, I heard my name again. Lee Min-jae. I staggered back, nearly knocking an urn from its shelf. My hand trembled as I steadied it. The paper tag on its side fluttered in the lantern's breath. I leaned close enough to read the ink. It was my name. And the date written beneath it was tonight. The air in the tunnel thickened, heavy as wet cloth draped over my face. The urn bearing my name trembled on its shelf, the paper tag fluttering as though stirred by breath. I stumbled back, lantern light quivering across the dirt walls. "Why is my name here?" I demanded. My voice cracked, too loud in the suffocating passage. Yoon did not answer. She kept walking, deeper into the dark, as if the question were useless. Her shadow stretched along the stone, unnaturally tall, bending in ways her body did not. The chanting grew clearer with every step. Low, mournful syllables, voices rising and falling like a tide. It no longer sounded like whispers trapped in urns. It sounded like a congregation waiting in the dark. We reached a chamber where the tunnel widened into a hall. The lantern revealed rows of mats laid out on the ground, each bearing the shape of a body under white funeral shrouds. There must have been dozens. I froze. Some of them moved. The shrouds rustled faintly, like fabric stirred by shallow breathing. My throat closed. "They're alive," I whispered. "No," Yoon said. "They're remembering." One of the shrouds shifted and sat upright. A pale hand slipped free, skin stretched thin over bone. The face beneath the cloth was blurred, as if smeared by smoke. But the sockets where eyes should have been turned toward me, and then another rose, and another, until a dozen figures sat facing me in silence. The chanting stopped. Together, they bowed their heads, and in one unified voice, they spoke my name, Lee Minjae. The sound struck me harder than the drum. My knees buckled, and I nearly dropped the lantern. The chamber spun, shadows bending into faces, faces bending into shadows. I turned to Yoon for help. Her expression was calm now, almost serene. She lifted the lantern higher, its glow sharpening the lines of her face. For the first time, I noticed how pale her skin was, how her breath left no mist in the cold air. "You should not have come," she said softly. "But you were always hunted." Her eyes caught mine, and I realized, with a cold shock, that they were as hollow and dark as the figures around us. Yoon was not among the living. She never had been. The chamber reeked of incense and ash. The figures in white shrouds swayed gently, like mourners lost in rhythm only they could hear. Their hollow eyes pinned me where I stood. Yoon stepped closer, lantern raised, and the light revealed the truth I hadn't wanted to see. The urn with my name was no longer on its shelf. It sat open on the floor at my feet, gray ash spilling like smoke, curling toward my shoes. "You belong here now," Yoon said. Her voice was tender, almost pitying, as though she were welcoming me home. "No," I whispered, stumbling back. "I'm alive." The shrouded figures tilted their heads in unison, as if confused by the word alive. For them, it seemed to mean nothing. Then the drum sounded again, louder than before, the entire chamber shaking. The mats shivered, the bodies under the shrouds rising to their feet. One after another, their voices merged into a single, thunderous chant. "Lee Minjae, Lee Minjae." I turned and ran. The tunnel twisted behind me, narrower, tighter, the walls pressing closer as if the mountain itself wanted to swallow me. My lantern flickered. Shadows stretched long, chasing me like grasping hands. When I reached the ladder, the way up was gone. The trapdoor above had vanished. In its place was only packed earth, smooth and solid, as though no exit had ever existed. The chanting followed, louder, closer. I pressed my palms against the dirt, clawing until my nails split, until blood streaked the wall. Nothing gave way. The earth was cold and merciless. Behind me, Yoon's voice rose above the chant, clear and sharp. "Do not fight it. The village remembers. The dead remember. And once they speak your name, you cannot leave." The drumbeat struck one final time, the sound exploding through my chest. I looked back, and in the glow of the dying lantern, I saw what they had prepared. A mat laid out in the center of the chamber, a white shroud waiting, my name inked across it in black. The figures stepped aside, leaving a path open for me, and though my body screamed to resist, my legs moved forward. The last thing I remember before the lantern guttered out was lying down, the shroud pulling over my face, and the sound of hundreds of voices whispering my name until it no longer felt like mine.